Without a doubt, I owe my life to these two men and their bravery. Those guys came in when they had to know it was a losing battle. There was nobody else left to back them up. If they'd not come in, I would not have survived. That was Warrant Officer Mike Durant. My name's Kevin, and this is History Goon. All right, so this is part 2 of the Battle of Mogadishu. I'm going to punch my microphone, sorry. And again, I'm going to release both of these episodes at the same time, which if you're hearing this, you've already known that. Continuity and whatnot, telling myself. So just to recap kind of where we left off, and I have my notebook here. We have just had Super 6-1, which is Cliff Walcott's Blackhawk, shot down. At this point, we've got a handful of guys that have made it to the crash site. The entire crew has either been killed in the crash, killed by the shrapnel of the RPG shot itself, or killed by the locals that have converged on the site. Excuse me. On the way to the crash site, the convoy is headed there. Dominic Pilla, who was an M60 gunner in one of the Humvees, was shot in the head and killed instantly. He is the first KIA in the entire event. So we're going to go right back to where we left off with Super 6-4, which is Mike Durant's helicopter. He's been hovering on the outer edge of the city, where he's supposed to be providing backup. When Walcott crashed, Durant was tasked with taking up his position over the city to provide overwatch and air support. Because again, he has Delta sharpshooters with him as well. So these guys are attempting to provide cover fire. But what they don't tell you about in the movie is how ballistics work, especially in a helicopter with engines as powerful as this, where bullets are very light, right? Depending on what these guys are shooting, they're not super heavy. The downwash of the rotors is going to push these rounds down and kind of either in or away, depending on the angle that they're shooting on. So they've got to do all kinds of math in their head to try to figure out where they're putting these rounds, which I can't imagine is the easiest thing in the world. But the SOAR team, which stands for Special Operations Aviation Regiment, by now has had an opportunity to fast stroke into the crash site and start doing their thing. So these SOAR guys are kind of like, they'd be made up of like Air Force Special Forces, Delta, SEALs, guys like that. The Air Force guys, I think, were probably are they PJs? ADD break. So we all kind of know what Navy SEALs do. The Air Force guys that are in this unit here are most likely PJs, which are parajumpers, which are basically Air Force Special Forces paramedics. These guys are badass. They are, everybody involved in this is. So they fast roped down to the crash site, and unfortunately, they really can't do much. The little bird that landed had picked up the few survivors that it could, and anyone that saw Walcott's bird get hit and saw how it went down knew that there's a pretty good chance that Walcott, who's the pilot, and Briley, who's the co-pilot, are probably both dead on impact. Now that the Somalis have set up roadblocks during the initial assault, the roads were a maze. Again, burning tires. They've dug trenches in the roads so that the vehicles can't move easily. They're going to make it very hard for these guys to get out of the city. During the exit, they started to take some pretty serious casualties in the effort to find the first crash site. This is the convoy again. With wounded in almost every vehicle of the convoy, they stopped at one point to pick up some Rangers along the way. Colonel McKnight radioed, quote, This is Uniform 6-4. I'm ready for exfil. I'm loaded with everything I can get here, and I'm ready to move to the crash site. Over. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Harrell, who's the Delta commander that was in the command Blackhawk, responded, quote, "The streets are fairly clear. We've been getting reports of sniper fire from the north side of the crash site. Take a right out of there and head south to the crash site." This should have been a fairly easy, navigable trip. 2 blocks north, 3 blocks east, with the command bird providing directions from a very, very elevated position. So they can see everything that's going on, because the command helicopter is actually flying a bit higher than where the Blackhawks and little birds that were dropping guys off were. Those birds are staying lower to provide support, where air command is way the hell up high, where they're going to stay out of, hopefully, shot sight, to kind of give these guys directions on the ground as to where they can and can't go. Mothman mug. Mike Durant is hovering in a tight pattern, covering the target building and the Olympic Hotel. And he could see the remaining Ranger chocks at the target building, and he could see the area where Walcott's bird went down. From where he's at, he can see the Ranger elements moving down the street and fighting towards the crash site. So he's flying like an overlapping pattern with Super 6-2 when the word hit that CSAR bird Super 6-6 has been hit with another RPG. Luckily for Super 6-6, this is kind of a glancing blow. They hit it on a weird angle, and it just kind of ricocheted off. The Blackhawk had dropped the CSAR team, which, hold on here, I gotta pull back up so I can remember what they were. The CSAR team is the Combat Search and Rescue team. So they had dropped this Combat Search and Rescue team, and he was getting back into his Overwatch position when the RPG hit. The first Blackhawk that got shot down a few weeks ago was considered a, quote, lucky shot. And that's mostly because RPGs are more for, like, ground fighting. They're not a guided missile. It's just kind of a, directional. You fire it and it goes that away, and it hits whatever is that away. And unlike what you see in video games where they go like 100 yards and then just explode if they don't hit anything, these things go like 900 yards or something like that before they kind of like start to lose trajectory and dip. The idea of firing one into the air is a pretty dangerous prospect, considering the backblast of firing one can actually kill somebody that's passing behind it when it's fired. Seen a lot of combat footage from places like Syria and over in that neck of the woods. And the amount of people that I have seen walk directly behind someone when they're firing an RPG and they just whoop and keel over is crazy. Because there's so much heat and pressure that you walk by and it basically concusses you to death. Just gonna kick over. Pretty not smart thing to do. So, if we look at an RPG, it's basically just a tube, right? With a hole in the end where you slide the rocket down in, take the, like lock the collar in, take the cap off the end of the grenade. The back end is a big bell. That's where the backblast comes out. It's all the pressure. So, if you take that RPG and you tip it down so that the cone where the backblast is aiming at the ground, it can still potentially kill the operator of the RPG because the backblast could, hit them sort of on an angle. So it's not a safe thing to do to decide to just chuck one of these things into the air. And then again, you're firing this thing into the air at a helicopter, which is going to make you a giant target because these birds are only about 1,000 feet off the ground. And the trail and all the dust and stuff pretty much screams, hey, look, that guy over there just fired an RPG, and makes you a giant target. With the big GE engine roaring above his head and the near constant chatter, Durant couldn't tell if he was being shot at as well. I mean, at this point in time, any of these guys in a interview will tell you, it's hard to say who was getting shot at because we were all getting shot at. Not only was he flying his circuit, he'd be changing airspeed and altitude to make himself a harder target. On his 5th circuit over the area, he felt a bump. Mike Durant, who's the pilot of Super 6-2, saw the impact of the grenade and saw a large chunk of the tail rotor fly off Durant's bird. Durant radios to him, 6-4, are you okay? Durant responded, he's cool as a cucumber, everything's fine. Nothing seems out of the ordinary at this point. All of his instruments were reading good. Nobody on board's hurt. We're cool. Air Command saw the hit and told Durant to head back home and put the bird down safely. The Blackhawk could run for quite a while after losing as much oil as it had from the gearbox. These things are engineered to be basically bulletproof. Like, yes, like in a vehicle, if you lose oil pressure, you're screwed, right? These are built different. Like, yeah, you've lost a bunch of oil. You can kind of, I mean, they're 3 miles from where they took off from. More than likely, you can limp it home. So he leaves his circuit pattern and he's headed back home. Gofina followed him about a mile as an escort, so he's only got a couple miles to get back to the airfield. As Gofina was turning his bird, he saw the tail rotor of Super 6-4 start to blur and then vanish. Durant and co-pilot Ray Frank fought the behemoth, trying to keep it airborne long enough to land safely. The bird is shuddering and shaking and dying. The last thing Mike Durant said over the radio before impact was, "Going in hard, going down." Mercifully, this Blackhawk nosed up on its way towards the ground, resulting in a hard but fairly flat landing, giving them a much better chance of surviving the crash. The crash. They can survive the crash. So, at this point, we now have 2 Blackhawks shot down. The majority of the crew in the first crash site is dead. The rest are wounded and being evacuated. Status of the second one is unknown. The convoy headed to the first crash site is turned around and lost in the maze of blocked-off streets. Under regular circumstances, the convoy would have just kind of plowed through the roadblocks and made their way to the crash sites. Unfortunately, this is a situation where having too much information kind of caused some issues. You've got the command bird keeping eyes on the ground, and they're seeing a group of like 20 to 60 Somalis following the convoy on adjacent streets. And the guys in the convoy were saying every time we would pass a break in buildings, we were getting shot. We were getting hit. Air Command would try to reroute the convoy away from the roadblocks that had been set up, but that would require that the convoy stop from time to time so that the helicopter could get a kind of a clearer view through the smoke. The thing is here, like, about 1,000 feet above the command helicopter was a Navy Orion spy plane that's got monitors and cameras that could capture the entire scene. That part's great. That's good, because, you know, more information's better. What isn't is the Navy plane had no direct contact with the convoy or the command bird. Everything they're conveying has to go back to JOC, which is Joint Operations Command. Has to go back to Joint Operations Command, then to the commander of the bird, and then to the convoy. And we're looking at like a 3 to 5 second delay in all of this, which when you're driving and someone says, "Hey, take a left onto, in this case, like Hallwadig Road," and you look up and you're like, "Oh, I'm 100 yards past it because I didn't get told in time." It'd be like your GPS, like, take exit 1 when you're on exit 3. So by the time the convoy is getting told where to turn, they're already passing intersections. This is the point where the convoy gets word about Super 6-4 being shot down. And I borrowed another quote from the book Blackhawk Down by Mark Bowden. Quote, "Danny, we had another Hawk go down to RPG fire south of the Olympic Hotel. We need you to get everyone that's in the first crash site. We need QRF to give us some help." McKnight told him that he understood, but he knew it was going to be a pretty steep hill to climb at this point. So he's now supposed to take this convoy that's already loaded down with dead and wounded. Parts of the convoy also have our captives, prisoners in them. He's supposed to take this and then go pick up more large, heavily armed and armored men, and then get to the second crash site. Delta operator Matt Ryerson was in the truck with the prisoners, and he's getting concerned because the driver of his truck has no clue where the convoy is going. Standard operating procedure was that commands would be sent from vehicle to vehicle so that everyone knew where they're headed. Ryerson gets really concerned when the lead Humvee driver was stopped after each intersection, which is effectively trapping the rest of the convoy out in the open. Not a good place to be, especially when you already know there's guys on either side, like either side street of you, flanking you, following you to where you're going, and whenever there's an opening between buildings, they're shooting at you. The Humvees are armored. The supply trucks where they're carrying a bunch of guys and the prisoners aren't. So this is a butt puckering, I would imagine. Ryerson then takes it upon himself that every time the vehicle stopped, he would just jump out of the vehicle he was in, move to the next one down the line, and try to keep everyone kind of on the same page. So he's in this Humvee. They stop. He hops out. He'll go back and talk to the next one. If they start moving, he just hops in with them. He may be in an empty seat. He may be laying across two guys in the back. It doesn't matter. The next time they stop, he's getting to the next vehicle. That's pretty bold, especially when you're actively being shot at. When the convoy passed back by the target building, an RPG scored a direct hit on the third Humvee in the column. The grenade passed through the side of the Humvee in front of the gas cap and detonated inside, blowing 3 men from the vehicle. The 2 most badly wounded were Private Adalberto Rodriguez and Delta Master Sergeant Tim Martin. Tim Martin got it the worst of anybody. Because when the RPG entered the vehicle, it ripped through the skin of the Humvee and didn't detonate. When it hit Tim Martin, it detonated. The blast blew him in half just below the waist. Rodriguez had the back of his thighs and most of his ass blown off, and he's trying to get out of the road as he's trying to crawl out of the way of the road. The 5-ton truck behind him, being driven by Private Maddox, just kind of rolls over the top of him. You can't really put any fault on the driver of that truck, because everything happened so fast that he wouldn't have had time to react. And I'm sure if anybody told him after, like, hey man, you ran one of our guys over, he probably felt terrible. I couldn't imagine. This whole situation has got to be, I mean, I'm going to point you guys in the direction of some interviews to watch or listen to after this. They'll fuck you up. They really will. Hey, I want to take a quick editing break here. So this episode was pretty rough to record. And it was this point during the edit, because as I'm going through and trying to find pictures, as many pictures of as many of these guys as I can to put in here when I mention their names. This one kind of caught me off guard because I forgot all about it. I just mentioned Matt Ryerson, a Delta operator that was going from vehicle to vehicle, spreading the word as to what's going on. I didn't realize until I was looking up a picture of this guy that he was killed 3 days after this happened in a mortar attack. So I think at the end of this, I kind of want to try to find as many of these guys as I can that I've mentioned by name to try to see, like, do like an update of, like, hey, what are they doing now? Because I know that some of them have gone on to do some really interesting things just from the ones that I know of. So I wanted to try to do that here. Well, this isn't towards the end, unfortunately. It's oh boy, it's just gonna get worse here for a bit. But I want to try to pay respect to the guys that are still around from this. Just to say, hey, what are they doing now? Like I said, I didn't even realize that he was killed 3 days after this, and something not even related to the event that we're talking about. But just wanted to hop in here and do a quick little thing. Okay, love you, bye. So with all of this going on, the convoy obviously has to stop. Rangers and Delta operators pour from every vehicle in the convoy, and they start firing at anything that's moving. During the fight, Sergeant Casey Joyce was shot in the back. So, if you watch the movie, you're going to see a guy make a comment like before they go off, like, "Hey, why don't you put a back plate in? Oh, I don't plan on getting shot in the back." That's one of the embellishments for the movie, because the Rangers' chest rigs that they were wearing didn't have space for back plates, so they didn't have an option to put a plate in the back, an armor plate. They have the chest plate, which sits. They're usually about yay wide. They'll sit like right about between your nips, and they protect all of the important things in your chest, like your heart, your lungs, your spine from the front. They'll like come down to like, they come down to like above your belly button. So they're not really big plates, but they're not designed to protect the entire front of you. They're designed to protect the important squishy bits inside up top. So he's shot in the back. The round hit him directly in the heart and killed him instantly. The only thing that stopped the round from coming out the front was it hit the inside of his front plate. Which, like, I don't know if I warned you guys. This episode's going to be kind of rough to listen to. But Clay Othick, who is one of the 50 cal gunners, got hit as well. Lorenzo Ruiz took up his position and was almost immediately shot as well. Ruiz is now slumped under the 50 cal in a way that Dave Ritchie, who would be the next in line to get onto the 50, can't really take up to position. This crazy son of a bitch got out of a bullet magnet Humvee, climbs on top of it from the outside, and just lays down on the roof and starts running the 50 caliber from there. And then the vehicle starts moving. So we're now moving back down the streets of Mogadishu while he is laying on the roof of a Humvee, firing a 50 cal. No, thank you. Ruiz's wounds are pretty gnarly. He was hit under the right arm, and the medic couldn't find an exit wound. At this point, McKnight is about ready to call it a day. He radios the control bird saying, convoy at this point in time is going to do more harm than good. We're full of dead and wounded, plus the vehicles are damaged. It's getting hard for us to move. The convoy is then ordered home. They have a handful of wounded, 8 dead on board. So they hit the K4 and they head back to base. The emergency convoy is leaving the base and headed back into the city. But from what Gofina could see from his position in his Blackhawk, they wouldn't get to Durant's site in time. There's hordes of Somalis converging on the crash site. The 2 crew chiefs on his Blackhawk are firing into the crowd. And there's a couple of little birds doing strafing passes on the crowd as well. In addition to the crew chiefs on the Blackhawk, 3 were Delta operators. We have Brad Hollings, Gary Gordon, and Randy Shiger. The Delta guys appear providing sniper fire, but it wasn't really all that effective. Again, shooting from a moving helicopter, plus having to take into account the downwash, it's not easy shots. You're basically just chucking lead and hoping it hits something important. The Delta guys told Gofina that they would be much more useful on the ground. Gofina radios into command, and he asks to insert them, and he's told that there's really no point, because we don't know if anybody's even alive in that helicopter. Gofina decides to take his bird low enough to do a couple of passes to see if he can see any movement. On one of the passes, he sees Mike Durant pushing up on a piece of a roof that had collapsed onto his legs. His co-pilot, Yacoin, saw that Ray Frank was still moving around on the ground, and there was movement from the back of the wreckage, which led them to believe that Bill Cleveland, Tommy Field, or possibly both have also survived the crash. Gofina's pretty fired up at this point in time. He's like, hey, we've got movement on the ground. He calls the command bird Alpha 5-1. He goes, "We definitely have survivors." Gofina was basically told to hold his position so he could see what the gunners could do from the air. The snipers are doing the best they could to like target those that are on the ground. Anybody that they see with an RPG tube is like auto-targeted. But the problem here is you'd pop a dude that had an RPG, he'd hit the ground, and the RPG would come back up because somebody else has immediately picked it up. They kept being told, rescue's imminent. One of the little bird pilots that's flying over and strafing tells the command bird, you don't understand what's going on. We need people on the ground now or we're going to lose this crash site. Yukon radios, quote, "Things are getting bad. Both convoys are taking fire and it doesn't look like they're going to make it in time. Mike and I have ID'd a field 25 to 50 yards away from where they're down." Oh, this part's going to suck. From behind the co-pilot, Yukon, Shigart and Gordon are preparing weapons and gear. They want to get into the fight, no matter what. They are essentially prepared to tell the command bird, "Suck dicks, we're going in to get these guys out." After some consideration, Harrell and Matthews in the command bird radioed back, quote, "Put him in." One of the guys on Super 6-2 said Gordy just gave him a big smile and a thumbs up. From here, we kind of have to break away from the situation that we're in. So from here, we have to break from the main frame of the storyline to focus on a couple of guys that I just mentioned. That's not to take away from what any of the other guys in this situation did. But what Gary Gordon and Randy Shigar are about to do puts them on a completely different path from everybody else. Gary Gordon was born August 30th in 1960 in Lincoln, Maine, which is a small town of about 5,000 people on the eastern half of the state. So if you look at it on a map, it's kind of like, it's one of those places where the way I wrote it out was, it's just down the road from the middle of nowhere. There's probably people in Maine that have never heard of Lincoln, Maine. His mother said that he was constantly doodling as a kid, quote, anything military related, which is probably due to the fact that he grew up during the Vietnam War era, and he was seeing it on TV pretty much every night on the news. While he was in high school, he was a Boy Scout and he played football at the at Matanacook Academy. I probably butchered that. Maine and New Hampshire have a lot of Native American named things, and I can't pronounce any of them. While he was in high school, he met his future wife, Carmen. He joined the military right out of school, and after joining the Army, he and Carmen got married, and they would end up having 2 kids, Ian and Brittany. And from what I could find, this may not be fully accurate, but I was going off of what I could find through like military records. He was first stationed at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, where he trained as a combat engineer with the 2nd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group as a ranger. He then joined the 1st Special Forces Operation Detachment Delta, who are the Delta guys we've been talking about, where he would be assigned as a sniper. So this dude being from like the middle of butt-ass nowhere in Maine, I'm sure he was probably a really good shooter from a very young age. Most people, when they think New England, it's all, coastline, lobster rolls, and like old money people on the coast. What you don't realize is most of that is just like Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island. We sometimes, as a New Englander, we sometimes forget that Rhode Island is part of New England because it's like that big. And yeah, I mean, my home state of Vermont is a weird mix of hippies and rednecks living together in somewhat harmony, but there's a lot of people out in this area that just grew up basically shooting rifles from the time they could walk. He took part in Operation Just Cause in 1989, which is the invasion of Panama to capture Manuel Noriega. And there's another guy. I mean, I should probably do that at some point because that's a weird story, especially how they got him to come out, because they just blasted Slayer and the sound of dead rabbits, which is kind of crazy. Like, hey, how are we going to get this guy to come out? I got it. Raining blood and the sound of people killing rabbits. But there's another guy that took part in that as well that I am definitely going to be covering, because if you look at the guy, you'd go, oh, why are you talking about an accountant? I'm not talking about an accountant. I'm talking about one of the baddest sons of bitches that's ever been in Delta. So the next big event that he would take place in after Operation Just Cause is where we're at now. Randy Shigart. He's born August 13th, 1958 in Lincoln, Nebraska. I do think it's interesting that there's that connection, as minuscule as it may be, that these two guys shared, that they were both born in towns that share the same name, and they were born like within like 15 days of each other, a couple of years apart. I'm not real big on coincidences. I think if you want to look at like the grand scheme of things, these two guys were supposed to meet and they were supposed to fight together. Take that as, how you want. That's fine. So after Randy's father left the Air Force, they moved from Nebraska to Newville, Pennsylvania. Again, kind of another middle of nowhere place. Not all that far from Harrisburg. He joined the Army in 1976, and by 1978, he's part of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, 75th Regiment in Fort Lewis, Washington, which Fort Lewis is kind of a hub for, like, the Rangers. I don't know if that's their main stationing point, but most of the guys that I've listened to interviews from, like, that were Rangers during, like, Global War on Terror, they all have stories about being in Fort Lewis. Now he would end up going to the Army Reserve in 1980. And by 1983, he's back to active duty in Special Forces School, where he would be assigned to Delta and transfer to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So with him, I couldn't really find any other things that he had done. But again, Delta doesn't really openly talk about the things that they're doing. So now we got to get into it. Son of a bitch. Okay. Gofina brought the bird down to about 5 feet off the ground, and after some backslaps and exchanges of good luck, Shigart and Gordon jumped out. So another fallacy from the movie. In the movie, these guys dropped, like, on top of Mike Durant's downed helicopter, basically. In reality, they're like 50 yards away in a field, and they have to fight their way to the crash site. So once they're on the ground, they're slightly disoriented from all the dust and flying debris. Mike Gofina notices that these guys are disoriented, so he drops back down and points them in the correct direction as to where to go. As the bird rises back into the air, the crew chief started throwing smoke grenades to offer him some cover. In the meantime, during the whole period of waiting for help here, Durant is passing out and waking up a few times. At one point in time, he came to and he noticed that Ray Frank, who's his co-pilot, was pretty badly hurt. And that Mike also realizes, I've got a broken leg. This is bad. Mike had this thing when he was flying where he would take off his wedding ring and put it on his watch band, because he didn't want it, like, getting caught on a rivet or on the instrument panel or anything like that. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of guys wearing, or pictures or anything like that, of guys wearing wedding rings and they get them caught on stuff and it degloves your finger. He didn't really want that. That doesn't sound like fun. In a later interview, he would say he didn't understand why, but he took his watch off and threw it on the dashboard of the helicopter. He then proceeded to get out his weapon in the cockpit, which is an HK MP5K, which are a shorter model of the MP5. These were actually, if I remember correctly, see if I can find it. I believe there was a picture in the book, and if there is, I will make sure I put it in. Yeah, it's not in the book. I must have seen the picture elsewhere. But these helicopters actually had, like, molded spots to put these weapons in for the pilots, so that they're not just, like, rattling around like you hop in your truck and just toss your pistol in the cup holder and drive to the store. They don't really want that happening. So Durant, at this point, knows things are extremely bad. And he didn't know the condition of the rest of his crew. He didn't really know his own condition. And all he can do at this point is prepare himself to fight and hope for rescue. So he's sitting there ready to fight. Gordon and Shigart arrive on the scene with their weapons that they had to do an Overwatch with, which would consist of Gary Gordon's heavily customized Car-15. Gordon's particular weapon is a Car-15 with an Aimpoint M5000 optic mounted up on the carry handle, a 12.5-inch barrel with an Allen Engineering suppressor. It's pretty sick. I've seen a lot of guys, like gun tuber guys. I think Administrative Results did one as well, where they cloned the Gordon Car-15, and they are so cool looking. Shigart's M14, on the other hand, is a little tougher to kind of pin down exactly what it is. From what I could find, it looks like it was a 22-inch match-grade barrel, an Aimpoint 5000, with a 3 to 5 optic, and a leather sling. It's a heavier rifle. You kind of want a sling with it, but pretty sure all of these would be slung because dudes don't just like roll into combat like bare ass in their rifle and not have a way to drop it to transition or pick somebody up. But Shigart preferred this over the Car-15 because this is a 7.62, so it's a 308. So it's got a lot more knockdown power. It would make it a little bit easier to shoot during aerial Overwatch because the round's heavier. You have a little bit less resistance from the downwash of the rotors. Might be a better option for shooting from a helicopter. Mike Durant didn't know these guys. He'd never met them before. But he's part of the Night Stalkers, which are some of like the super elite helicopter pilots. He actually wrote a book called The Night Stalkers, where they go through a bunch of their missions that they've been a part of. I will definitely be pulling some from that book at some point to do some episodes on, believe me. So he doesn't know these guys, but he knows Delta when he sees them. Gordon and Shigart are at the outside of this helicopter. They're talking to Mike. They've got the entire city coming down on them. They get Durant out of the chopper, and then they proceed to take the other men out of the downbird as well. While working on getting the other guys out, Durant with his MP5 is taking pot shots at militiamen that are making their way to the crash site. The problem that he runs into here is it's hard to say if it is... I want to say it's probably from the impact of the crash. His MP5 is malfunctioning after every shot. He'll fire, and it's not ejecting, so he has to rack it to eject the round to fire again. I would love an MP5. It's kind of a bucket list firearm for me. But H&K hates civilians. Heckler and Koch hate civilians, so they will never release a civilian version. So I'll never be able to get one. So as he's doing all this, on the other side of the bird, Shigart and Gordon are stacking dudes like cordwood. At the same time that all this is going on, about 100 yards away, Little Bird pilot Keith Jones and Carl Meyer, who left the first crash scene, waited for the operators and pilot to make their way to the chopper to get in and go. Super 6-1 pilot Mike Gaffina told the Little Bird pilots that the men on the ground had men that were too wounded to make their way to the Little Bird. After 5 minutes, the Little Bird, who's low on fuel, has to return home to refuel. During this time, the entire Hornet's Nest is making its way to the second crash site. Durant, on the other side of the downed helicopter, under a tree, didn't know the condition of the rest of the crew or the operators that had been sent in to help him. At one point during the intense gunfire being traded between Gordon and Shigart and the militiamen, Gordon shouted that he was hit, and they didn't hear from him again. It's pretty widely believed that Gordon was killed in this period of time right here. But nobody's exactly sure if this was it or if it was a little bit later on. Durant really is completely unaware of anything that's happening right now. All he knows is he is attempting to defend himself with a broken leg and a busted machine gun. He sees Shigart come around the side of his the helicopter and asks Durant if they kept any weapons on board. Durant lets Shigert know that there's M16s on the craft. After coming back out with both weapons, so after coming back out of the helicopter with a fresh M16, Shigert handed Durant Gary Gordon's Car-15. This is one of the more heartbreaking scenes in the movie, and it's actually pretty accurate. So he hands him off the rifle. He's like, hey, Gordy's gone. He hands him Gordon's Car-15. He says, hey, Gordy's gone. I'm going back out. Before he goes back out, he gets the support frequency on the radio and calls into headquarters and is like, hey, we need help right now. This is the point where Mike Durant realizes his entire rescue force was 2 men, and one of them is now dead. Shigart was told that a reaction force was en route. Randy Shigart, being the baddest son of a bitch on the ground in Somalia at the moment, after hearing that, takes both M16s with him and goes back out and starts shooting bad guys again. Durant said he heard almost 2 full minutes of nonstop gunfire between AKs, the M16s, and a handgun, which to me, well, not even. Which means that at one point in time, Randy Shigart didn't have time to reload or switch to the other rifle. He had to pull his sidearm and start shooting people because they were that close so that he could get on to his other rifle. As all this gunfire is going on, Durant said he heard Shigart yell, and then the gunfire stopped. Durant, after running out of ammo on Gordon's Car-15, saw men approaching him, and he just lays the rifle across his chest, realizing that this is it. I'm dead. So because he stopped firing and just laid his rifle across his chest, they didn't kill him, they captured him, which is not optimal. I'll get into it more at the end of the episode, but for their efforts, both Randy Shigart and Gary Gordon were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Some of the reports say that between the two of them, they killed probably 25 militia, but it's hard to say because the Somalis would often pull their dead out of the area. When they did final counts and stuff, they only found 25 bodies around the second crash site. So they probably killed double to triple that. All right. As the sun started to go down, Gofina kept flying a circuit above the second crash site. He banked right and turned and felt a huge collision. He was deafened by the RPG impact, and all of the screens on his instrument panel in the cockpit went dead. They were airborne, but going down quickly. He aimed for an alleyway where he thought he could kind of land safely, but at damn near the last second, the bird just comes back to life. Divine intervention, good luck, bad electrical connection, whatever. He doesn't crash. He limps this damaged aircraft all the way to the Newport facility, which is controlled by an ID'd rival clan. So this is a safe place for him to land, because the people here are somewhat friendly with the U.S. and UN forces. So he can land here and not be kidnapped and have his crew's dead bodies dragged through the streets and hacked up and returned in trash bags, which was a reality, actually. So another thing they don't talk about in the movie is we technically have 3 Blackhawks that are shot down during this whole situation. Now completely on his own on the ground, Mike Durant is staring up at the sky, hoping that more bad men in black helmets are going to fall from it and get him out of the danger zone. He hears men running all around him, yelling things he can't understand. Finally, one of them rushed him and just butt stroked him across the face, broke his nose and his eye socket with an AK butt. He is still conscious as the mob started yanking at him, trying to pull him free from where he was. So he actually like slapped at their hands and stuff enough to get them to stop so that he could undo the plastic clasp that were holding him in place. They stripped his shirt, vest, and boots off. One of the guys starts to pull his pants off and realizes that Mike Durant is going commando. He quickly... so the guy that's trying to yank his pants off goes, ugh, and just like zips him back up. One of the men in the crowd gets right in his face and starts yelling, Ranger, Ranger, you die in Somalia. They then crammed dirt into his face, tied a shirt around his face, and then hoisted him out of what was left of the Blackhawk that he is tipped up against. They weren't careful about it. He said that every time his leg was hit or bounced off of something, he would pass out from the pain because his leg is very, very badly broken. And he also recounted that when they got him to wherever they were taking him, they tried to yank his boots off and they twisted his broken leg and popped his femur out through the muscle and skin, which I don't deal well with compound fractures, like even cartoon ones, like Family Guy, where somebody's like breaks their arm and there's shit sticking out of the skin. I don't handle that well at all. So seeing him in real life is horrifying. Durant would alternately be carried and dragged through the streets for a period of time before being delivered to Aidid's propaganda minister, Abdullah Hassan, who was also, thankfully, a doctor. During his time there, he was treated for his injuries, which now included a gunshot wound that he got from a militia member that stumbled into the room that he was being held in and was surprised by him. I'm going to play a clip of him that they videotaped while he was in captivity. They used for propaganda. Just pretty horrifying to watch.
CW3, Mike Durant, U.S. Army. U.S. Army. I'm a Blackhawk pilot. Blackhawk pilot. Soldier has to do what I'm told. Innocent people being killed is not good. Soldier has to do what I'm told.
From what he said, he wasn't actually treated badly. He was fed and allowed to have his Bible with him. At some points, one of the Somalis would come in while he was reading his Bible, and he would sit with him and he would read his Quran. He would be released 11 days after he was captured, after members of the Red Cross met with his captors. Other than him, they also released a Nigerian soldier that they are not 100% sure when he was captured. All they know is he was captured before this entire incident took place. So he very well could have been just a random, street patrol guy that was out doing like the weapons inspections or whatever that they just snatched. They really don't know when they picked that guy up. Mike Durant would make a full recovery at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany and rejoin the 160th SOAR. By the time he retired in 2001, he had clocked more than 3,700 flight hours, and almost 1,500 of those were done in the dark with night vision goggles, which is super impressive. That's kind of where the nickname Night Stalkers came from, is these were the guys that were flying night missions where you can't see anything. You're flying by radar and night vision. It's It's pretty cool, the stuff that these guys can do. So now we're going to get into what the 10th Mountain Division brought to the party. The 10th Mountain Division that was in country was the 214, and they were the acting quick reaction force. They were asked to go to the airfield just in case Task Force Ranger needed them for any kind of backup of any sort. Between the time they got the call to go to the airfield for backup and the time that they would actually get there, parameters changed and they were sent into the city because they were needed then. The two commanders of 10th Mountain went into the operations center and spoke with General Garrison and Lieutenant Colonel Van Arsdale. They're briefed on what is taking place and told, hey, this is the route that you have to take to get into the city. So they get into the back of the 2.5-ton trucks. A lot of these trucks are loaded down with sandbags and plywood. This is to offer a little bit of protection to the guys in the back. The route that was planned was to take the most direct route to the crash site, and by the time they rolled out, it had turned into multiple crash sites. So these guys have been briefed between the two helicopters going down. The convoy was led by Captain Whetstone. Everything was kind of going fine for them for the most part until they hit the K4 circle. This is when all hell breaks loose for them. They're being hit with RPGs, being shot at with small arms. And when they get to the circle, it was the same time that Stucker was coming back. So these ships pass in the night. You have Stucker's crew going back with Blackburn and a bunch of other wounded, and the 10th Mountain guys headed into the city. They keep going, and they'd be hit again and again and again. They get hit pretty hard at National Street, which had been blocked off by crushed cars and tires. They would have to turn onto National Street for the most direct route, but due to the blockage, they kept driving until they came to the milk factory, which is where they couldn't go any further because the road is completely blocked. There's not even anywhere to turn around on the street. The road is blocked by a line of vehicles 3 deep, destroyed vehicles, 3 vehicles deep, and then a wall of tires and other random stuff, and it's all on fire. So not a great option. The decision was made to turn around and go back. This would mean that they would have to go all the way back through everything they just passed. So in the process of getting lost and turned around and shot up, they have to go back to the airfield. They get back to the airfield right around dusk, and the trucks just barely made it there. And by just barely made it there, I mean all the windows are shot out and all the tires are completely flat. Right here, the seriousness of the whole situation is starting to really sink in on the 10th Mountain. They know that the Rangers in Delta were in really deep trouble and that the only ones that could get them out were them. They've got to regroup and reorganize. They had to get the wounded off the trucks, reload ammo, get water. They also have to get an update on the situation. So here the idea of having some kind of armor with them comes up. By that I mean an armored vehicle. They would have been able to get some of the U.S. armored vehicles that are in the area, but the Secretary of Defense denied the request. Because those are expensive. And we don't want to lose one. Stupid. Yeah, no, we got a bunch of guys getting shot and killed, but we can't really afford to lose an APC. Colonel David went back into the Tactical Operations Command to speak with Brigadier General Guile and Major General Garrison about the situation, to see if they had any updates. He's told that they're going to go to the port facility to meet up with a Malaysian armored unit and a Pakistani tank unit. Cool. They came up with a plan to see if the Malaysians would remove their infantry from the APCs so that 10th Mountain could just have their guys go in and take them. So this part's going to be a little stressful because they have to try to figure out how to operate these vehicles that they're not familiar with. And they also have to try to figure out how to communicate with the Malaysians and the Pakistanis. Malaysians and Pakistanis don't speak the same language. And I'm assuming none of these dudes in 10th Mountain spoke Pakistani or Malaysian. some of the guys didn't like the fact that they're going into a hot zone of vehicles that are they're painted white, which in the dark is going to make them stick out like a sore thumb. And right here, it's pretty important to mention that the QRF is made up of not just the 10th Mountain guys. There's also an even split of about 15 each, Rangers and Delta with them. So we've got 10th Mountain guys who can fight that are going into transport, and we've got trigger pullers with them as well. So the initial plan is to have the Pakistani tanks take the lead into the city so that, I mean, there's not a lot of roadblocks that are going to stop a tank. They might slow it down, but there's not a lot that are going to completely stop it. The Pakistani tank commander calls back to say, hey, this is what we want to do. And his command told him there's no way in hell that you guys are taking the lead. That plan is scratched, and this would mean that the Malaysian APCs would now be taking the lead. We also have a little bit of a mission change here. It's no longer helping the Rangers. We're going in to save them because they're getting their asses kicked. The Rangers and Delta can fight like nobody's business. But when you're outnumbered like 30-1, there's only so much you can do. As soon as they got to National Street, hell breaks loose again. Bullets flying from every direction. These guys are getting hit from all over the place. They're also taking RPG fire. The APCs are getting hit with rockets, and the men inside them are being tossed around from the impact. Just as they got to the turn that they were supposed to make, the front two APCs get hit by RPGs. And it's at this point in time that they realize they cannot go north or straight because the roads are completely blocked. So they have to head back south. This is when Captain Marowich, I believe is how we pronounce that name, he realizes what's going on and prevents the rest of the convoy from going south. Now the two lead APCs are all on their own, and one of them gets hit by another RPG. So they call a full halt. Guys get out and set up a protective perimeter around the APCs. The rest of the convoy still at the intersection is at a crossroads because the 10th Mountain guys want the Pakistanis to go over the blockade. However, the Pakistanis don't want to take the risk. This would lead the 10th Mountain guys to dismount the APCs and go ahead on foot. When they get to the Olympic Hotel, the road is blocked by burning cars and tires. So at this point, we kind of have to mention who's going where. So the guys of Alpha Company have to actually open up these roadblocks so that the APCs and tanks can get through. So they have to hand remove all this stuff, which, like we saw last episode with the Pakistani group that got ambushed, if you have to remove this stuff by hand, you are going to get shot a bunch. So they clear the first obstacle enough so that they could get everybody moving forward. And they're kind of leapfrogging each other up the street, taking fire the entire time. They got to the road just before the hotel, and they got held up by a large amount of gunfire coming from the buildings all around them. So here we have a machine gun unit go down and another one take their place. And all of this is going on while these guys are being directed on which way to go from the command bird. They begin clearing house by house after they were able to get past the hotel, which you want to talk nerve-wracking. I could only imagine going into any number of these houses, not knowing how many of or who is in here that wants to shoot you. And you're just like, I guess we got to go in. So the only way they're able to get past the hotel is when a Humvee rolls up with a Mark 19, which is a belt-fed 40-millimeter grenade launcher, shows up and it just cuts loose, and it turns this section of the hotel into rubble. By this point, the rubble has been moved enough that the APCs can get through. But the lead APC driver is given commands by his higher-ups not to go anywhere. And this causes a little bit of an issue. So as all this is going on, Alpha Company is making their way to Crash Site 1. As they're getting closer, they're just being super careful that they are not going to be hit by friendly fire, because the guys that have been on the ground for this entire time are a little bit wired. Lieutenant Lee Van Arsdale led himself and his radio guy ahead to meet up with Scott Miller, who is the Ranger Task Force commander. After meeting with Miller, he went back to link up with Captain Marowich, and he also meets with Captain Steele, who is another guy that's in command on the ground. This is when Van Arsdale speaks up and says, hey, I'm in charge. And these guys are like, sure, yeah. I think at this point in time, they're probably so just done with everything that they don't want to argue. They're like, yeah, go for it, man. I don't care. They then move forward with the tanks and the APCs to begin the process of loading the wounded onto the APCs. And this is not an easy thing to do, because the road that they're traveling down is really narrow. Most of the streets in Mogadishu are not necessarily, I mean, they're designed for cars. They're not designed for like APCs and tanks, which, spoiler alert, are a little bit wider than cars. So as they're doing this, Alpha Company is having a really hard time getting Walcott out of Super 6-1. They essentially had to bring what almost looks like a concrete saw with them to try to cut the cockpit open to get him out, because they are not going to leave anybody here if they can afford to, because they've seen what happens if guys get left behind. So this saw is having a huge issue trying to cut through the metal. So they begin to ram the side of the helicopter, trying to crack it open. Meanwhile, at Crash Site 2, things are not any better. When they arrived, one of the APCs pulled up beside the helicopter and two more behind it. Once it stopped, the front APC was hit with an RPG and then immediately gunfire after that. That was one of their big tactics that the Somalis would use, is they would hit a vehicle with an RPG, and as soon as there was impact, open up with everything else that you've got on it. So again, we have to get everybody out, create a perimeter to kind of secure the area to try to keep this thing from getting destroyed so that we can get everybody out. Once the site is secure, they begin removing all the sensitive material from the helicopter. They also start shouting out names of guys that are aboard the helicopter to try to see if they're still there. And when they get no answer, they have to start following blood trails. They're hoping that they're going to find somebody, holed up somewhere in a shanty that's dragged themselves away from the crash. But after 20 minutes of nonstop searching, they stopped because they didn't find a single body. Which means Crash Site 2, Mike Walcott has been captured. His co-pilot, Frank, is dead and has been removed. The two crew chiefs are dead and gone. Randy Shiger and Gary Gordon have been dragged off and they're gone as well. This is not good. So we're going to hop back to the other two APCs that went a different direction by themselves. They'd stopped not too far after going south, and they're getting beat up just like everybody else. So not only are these guys still trying to keep moving, they're also trying to figure out where the hell the rest of the APCs went. Lieutenant Hollis took his radio guy, who's a machine gunner and an interpreter, back up the hill to try to figure out where everybody's at. And this is when they found out that they were all alone, which has got to be awful. The radio guy heard over the radio that their platoon was missing and presumed dead. So this is when Lieutenant Hollis gets on the radio after he's presumed dead, and he's like, oh no, we're just in a lot of trouble and we need help. The colonel told him to calm down and they would get someone out there to help him as soon as they could. So these guys are in deep trouble. They're starting to get light on ammo. They've got a lot of casualties piling up. And just when things are looking the worst, this is when the little birds come back in. And they rocket the bejesus out of the buildings where these guys are getting shot at from. The command sergeant major asked the APC commander, Major Aziz, if they could borrow a vehicle to kind of go after their guys. Aziz went up the chain of command on his side. The first time he got told, no, we're not sending anything out there. Aziz asked a second time, and the answer is still no. So now the command sergeant major and Aziz are both getting annoyed because Aziz's battalion commander is not grasping the situation. Neither one of these commanders want to leave their men down there where they're going to get killed. This is when Aziz makes a choice to completely disregard his orders and go in after his men and to try to help these Americans out. Which, that's admirable. He's probably going to get in trouble for it, for, disobeying a direct order. But to also say, no, I'm not going to let anybody else die on my watch. That's admirable. That's a tough choice to make. Matter of fact, for his choice to completely disregard this order, he would later be awarded with the Pangila Barini for gallantry in the face of the enemy. I'm assuming that's a Pakistani medal of some sort. I had to find that out because I'm curious. Oh, okay. So back from the ADD break, I was completely wrong. And may have been a little prejudice in me to go, oh, Aziz, he's Pakistani. Nope. Turns out this Aziz fella was Malaysian. And the medal that he got is Malaysia's second highest gallantry award, coming in second to the Grand Knight of Valor, which, I mean, that's pretty cool. This guy had some balls, and he was awarded for it. So they head down to where the men were, and they pile them all into vehicles and proceed back to the Pakistani stadium. So we're going to jump back to Crash Site 1, where at this point it's just about daylight, and these guys need to get out of the city. Before Lieutenant Colonel David gave the command for his guys to move out, he got on the comms with the Task Force Ranger HQ to make sure that all of the bodies had been accounted for from that crash site. They'd all been accounted for, so the order was given for them to move out. Lieutenant Colonel Hollis decided that the best course of action for moving out was to put the QRF, the 10th Mountain, the QRF, the 10th Mountain, Malaysian, Pakistani guys in the very front, and then the Delta and Ranger guys in the rear. And this is when, if you watch the movie, this part is what they refer to as the Mogadishu Mile. They took the same route back that they took into the city. Unlike the movie, where these guys just kind of ran down the middle of the road and everybody was fine. They're having to move from building to building, taking cover. They're getting shot at. They're having to return fire. There was, I believe it was the Tom Satterley interview with Sean Ryan, which if you listen to this, I'm going to tell you right now, if you listen to these episodes and you want like more detail from someone who was actually there, the Tom Satterley interview on the Sean Ryan show is required listening. I believe it's like 3 or 4 parts, but he says right at the very beginning, I am never doing another interview about this. And, as long as I'm around, I'm done talking about it. So you need to listen to it because it's directly from a guy that was there, not some dickhead with an internet connection and a microphone. Heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking interview. Very hard to listen to a lot of parts of it. I listened to it at work, and there was parts where I had to find spots to like hide in in like a utility closet because I was starting to cry. And that's just how I am. I get, stuff like this is like, I get a little emotional with it. And it's, you know what? I don't care. Whatever. Judge me. So like I was saying, the Tom Satterley interview, I don't remember if you said it was him or if it was somebody that was running in front of him. But as they're firing into these buildings, this guy was like firing off like 10, 15 rounds. He'd drop his mag to reload it, and the guy behind him would pick the magazine up and load it into his rifle and start shooting because he didn't have any ammunition left. So he was just grabbing magazines. Like, it could have had 3 rounds in it. He didn't know. He'd just pick it up and rip off what he could, drop the mag, and wait for another one to hit the ground where he could try it again. So after fighting their way out of the city, they get to a certain point. They pile into and on top of the APCs and get the rest of the way back out.
That's the Mogadishu mile started. Running and gunning. I was out of ammo again. I remember people were dropping mags and reloading their mags, and I'd pick up a mag off the ground and knock the dirt out of it, stick it in. I'd 3 rounds, in there, and I'd grab another mag.
It was that bad.
Yeah, for me anyway. Guys are dropping mags with 3, and I'm like, all right, well, you're not as bad off it as I am because I have 0 mags with 0 bullets. And I remember finally making it back to all of the vehicles and all the tanks. And it was weird that the tanks were just shooting into the city. These armored vehicles were just rocking 50s into the city and Mark 19s and launching grenades and God knows what direction, what they saw. It was a sight to see. I remember looking up at one of the Packy drivers and I was like, smacked him on the head, and he looked at me. I'm like, thank you, and just looked back like he was terrified.
They would all kind of regroup back at the Pakistani stadium, kind of like in the movie. And that's kind of where the story ends on my side of it. There is a lot of resources out there. I would highly recommend I can't remember the name of the documentary on Amazon. Give me a second here. So if you go on Amazon, there is a documentary called Blackhawk Down, The Untold Story. If you go on Netflix, there is Surviving Blackhawk Down, which I would also highly recommend. The movie is pretty accurate. There's some people whose names got changed for one reason or another. There's some people that are in the movie that weren't actually real people that, again, were just a substitute in for somebody else. And it is a fantastic movie. The cast alone is insane of how many people you're going to see. Like, you see these guys and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's Tom Hardy. Like, what the hell? It's very good. And again, the book, Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden, incredible. If you don't have time to read it, it's definitely worth an Audible credit. I know a lot of you guys out there, dorks like me, that are like, I'm going to listen to audiobooks all day. It's fine. The Sean Ryan episode where he interviews Tom Satterley, I'm going to put a quote in here, not a quote, but a clip in here from there.
You have also stated in previous interviews that American soldiers' body parts began showing up at the base gate in trash bags. Let's start with the trash bags.
What hurts me the most about the trash bags probably happened a couple years ago. Talking to one of the spouses whose body parts were in that trash bag. And she can't use trash bags. She just can't use trash bags anymore to think of that. I don't know what the delivery was for. I don't know if it was to give them back, and that's just the only way to do it after they hack them apart. I mean, that's sad when that's how you identify people, is in body parts in trash bags delivered to your front gate. I think the body parts were from probably part Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart and maybe one of the crew chiefs.
This is one of those situations where you can kind of did we have to be there? Probably not. Were we trying to do the right thing? Yeah, I think so. I think we were there trying to do the right thing, which personally for me, there's a lot of conflicts that we've been involved in since World War II where you can kind of look at it and go, did we really have to do that? Vietnam, I guess, to an extent. Panama, again, trying to do the right thing, maybe, sure. Bosnia, questionable. Again, not sure that I don't personally know enough about that whole conflict yet to really have a take on it, but that's something that's on my list because it's one of those things I've wanted to learn more about after I've seen a little bit of stuff. I know that there's a war criminal with a pet tiger at one point, but he's not to be celebrated. He was a scumbag. But before we go, I don't want to. I need to go over a list. So this is the list of KIA from Operation Gothic Serpent. From the from 10th Mountain, we have Private First Class James Martin, Sergeant Cornell Houston. From the 160th SOAR Unit, this is the pilots and flight crew. Staff Sergeant William Cleveland, Staff Sergeant Thomas Field, Chief Warrant Officer Raymond Frank, Chief Warrant Officer Cliff Walcott, Chief Warrant Officer Donovan Briley. From Delta, we have Master Sergeant Gary Gordon, Sergeant First Class Randy Shugart, Staff Sergeant Daniel Bush, Sergeant First Class Earl Fillmore, Master Sergeant Tim Martin. From the 75th Ranger Regiment, we have Corporal Jamie Smith, Specialist James Cavaco, Sergeant Casey Joyce, Private First Class Richard Kowalski, Sergeant Dominic Pilla, and Sergeant Lorenzo Ruiz. We had a total of 78 wounded that survived. Now, the other thing I wanted to do, because I did spend a little bit of time on both of these guys, wanted to read the Medal of Honor citations for Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart. Master Sergeant Gary I. Gordon, United States Army, distinguished himself by action above and beyond the call of duty on 3 October 1993, while serving as a sniper team leader, United States Army Special Forces Command with Task Force Ranger in Mogadishu, Somalia. Master Sergeant Gordon's sniper team provided precise fire from the lead helicopter during the assault and at 2 helicopter crash sites, while subject to intense automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenade fire. When Master Sergeant Gordon learned that ground forces were not immediately available to secure the crash site, he and another sniper unhesitatingly volunteered to be inserted to protect the 4 critically wounded personnel, despite being well aware that the growing number of enemy personnel closing on the crash site. After his 3rd request to be inserted, Master Sergeant Gordon received permission to perform his volunteer mission. When debris and enemy ground fire at the site caused him to abort the first mission, Master Sergeant Gordon was inserted 100 meters south of the crash site. Equipped with only his sniper rifle and pistol, Master Sergeant Gordon and his fellow sniper, while under intense small arms fire from the enemy, fought their way through a dense maze of shanties and shacks to reach the critically injured crew members. Master Sergeant Gordon immediately pulled the pilot and other crew members from the aircraft, established a perimeter which placed him and his fellow sniper in the most vulnerable position. Master Sergeant Gordon used his long-range rifle and sidearm to kill an undetermined number of attackers until he depleted his ammunition. Master Sergeant Gordon then went back to the wreckage, recovered some of the crew's weapons and ammunition. Despite the fact that he was critically low on ammunition, he provided some of it to the dazed pilot that then radioed for help. Master Sergeant Gordon continued to travel the perimeter, protecting the downed crew. After his team member was fatally wounded and his own rifle ammunition exhausted, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon returned to the wreckage, recovering a rifle with the last 5 rounds of ammunition, gave it to the pilot with the words, "Good luck," and then, armed with only his pistol, Master Sergeant Gordon continued to fight until he was fatally wounded. His actions saved the pilot's life. Master Sergeant Gordon's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest standards of military service and reflect great credit on him, his unit, and the United States Army. So, here's the citation for Randy Shugart. Sergeant First Class Randall D. Shugart, United States Army, distinguished himself by actions above and beyond the call of duty on 3 October 1993 when serving as a sniper team member, United States Army Special Operations Command with Task Force Ranger in Mogadishu, Somalia. Sergeant First Class Shugart provided precise sniper fire from the lead helicopter during an assault on a building and at 2 helicopter crash sites, while subjected to intense automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenade fire. While providing critical suppressive fire at the second crash site, Sergeant First Class Shigart and his team leader learned that ground forces were not immediately available to secure the site. Sergeant First Class Shigart and his team leader unhesitatingly volunteered to be inserted to protect the 4 critically wounded personnel, despite being well aware of the growing number of enemy personnel closing in on the site. After their third request to be inserted, Sergeant First Class Shigart and his team leader received permission to perform the volunteer mission. They have to call it a volunteer mission on both of these, because they can't say that these guys were ordered to go down in, because I think Gordon and Shigart both knew that if they went down here to do this, they're probably going to die. And the Army is not going to give orders to go on a suicide mission. And also, these guys did volunteer to do this, and that's why they're making it such a big deal, is that they weren't ordered to go in and do this. They wanted to go in and do this to try to help their guys on the ground. When debris and enemy ground fires at the site caused them to abort the first attempt, Sergeant First Class Shigart and his team leader were inserted 100 meters south of the crash site. Equipped with only his sniper rifle and a pistol, Sergeant First Class Shigart and his team leader, while under intense small arms fire from the enemy, fought their way through a dense maze of shanties and shacks to reach the critically injured crew members. Sergeant First Class Shigart pulled the pilot and other crew members from the aircraft, established a perimeter which placed him and his fellow sniper in the most vulnerable position. Sergeant First Class Shigart used his long-range rifle and sidearm to kill an undetermined number of attackers while protecting the downed crew. Sergeant First Class Shigart continued his protective fire until he depleted his ammunition and was fatally wounded. His actions saved the pilot's life. Sergeant First Class Shigart's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest standards of military service and reflect great credit on him, his unit, and the United States Army. So, that was a rough episode to record. I remember this happening when I was a kid. This is 1993, so that would have made me, I was 6 years old when these helicopters got shot down. Not old enough to know what was going on yet, but as I got older and started getting more interested in history and things like that, wanted to look into it. I bought a copy. I've had this copy of Blackhawk Down for, I don't know, probably 20 years at this point. I remember buying it in high school, so I've had it for bare minimum 20 years. This exact copy that I just had up. And I've read through it a couple of times. I've listened to it a couple of times, and it doesn't make it any easier to talk about. Because like I said, I know people will probably give me a hard time for it, but I do tend to get a little emotional with stuff like this. I don't really know why. Especially when we got into the part about Gordon and Shigart, where these guys sacrificed their lives to save a guy that they'd never met. And I think that's the part that got me the worst. And the fact that we were there trying to do the right thing, trying to feed these people and trying to make sure that they're not going to starve to death because leadership in their country cared more about themselves and making money and having control than if people were actually being taken care of. And honestly, that's still kind of a problem that is going on in Somalia now. Except now, instead of like groups of warlords, it's pirates and stuff like that. Still not a great place to be. I don't imagine. But with that being said, next week we're going to do something a little bit lighter than this, because I don't want to keep doing heavy duty topics like that all in a row. And also, I've got another Another real big episode coming out here in a few weeks. So I'm going to take it easy for a couple weeks and just do some lighthearted, fun stuff. If you enjoyed this episode, you can go over to Patreon, patreon.com/1159media. $5 a month to get you early access to all the shows there. If you think what I'm doing is worth a tip for me personally, I have a Ko-Fi. It's ko-fi.com/historygoonpod. You can throw me a tip there if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm not going to beg for it. What I will beg for is that you tell other people about the show. You rate, review, and subscribe wherever you can. Head on over to YouTube, History Goon Pod on YouTube. All of my video stuff goes up there. So if you're not on Patreon and you don't like Spotify, but you still want video, because I do try to do some interesting stuff with the videos and try to make it more engaging for like the audience that does video. Because yeah, you can sit and listen to me. That's fine. If you're going to watch it, I try to keep you at least interested with like little like pictures that'll pop up and stuff like that. But yeah, subscribe there too as well. That'd be awesome. So until next week, we're all going to die someday. So go out and do some goon shit and leave a mark on the world. Just like all these guys did. Thanks.